Welcome back to the Automation Podcast. My name is Shawn, and this week on the show, I meet up with James Parsons of SCADAmatic to learn all about his new product, SimServe. Now, before we get to that, a quick word from our sponsor, theautomationschool.com. This is where I teach courses on Control Logics, Compact Logics, VUSE, PanelView Plus, Siemens S7 PLCs, and more. So if you or somebody you work with needs training on those products, please get in contact with me directly. You can use the contact link, or you can leave me a voicemail by using the phone number on the top of the website.
James, welcome to the show. I really appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule to come on to talk to us about your product. But before we jump into that, could you take a few moments to introduce yourself to our audience and maybe talk a little bit about your company?
Yes, of course. Thanks for making the time for me, Shawn. Thanks for having me on. A little bit about myself. So I went to school, went to college and studied mechanical engineering. Initially, I wanted to do machine design, but halfway through school, I realized that after taking a controls class, that was definitely where the passion was. So after I graduated, took the first job I could find working for a systems integration firm. Worked there for about 5 years, doing some work on water, wastewater plants, did some pharmaceutical, some manufacturing stuff. Then I moved on for a few years, worked for an OEM doing automation work for them. And then about a year ago, I started my own business, and now I'm doing that.
Awesome. Tell us about it.
Yeah, so SCADAmatic, I started SCADAmatic for two reasons. The first reason was I really like developing clean, good software solutions. That's kind of where my passion is. And I thought if I started my own business, I'd have some freedom to do that a bit more. And then, more importantly, over the 8 years or so I worked directly in the automation control systems world, I did come across some cases where I was working with some control system softwares that had a plethora of issues, and I kind of felt they were unacceptable issues given the criticality of control systems. And I wanted to build a business with the right core values that made sure software products that went into the control systems industry didn't have those types of quirks associated with it. So that's kind of the belief system behind SCADAmatic. And we do have some core values, which I'll put up on the screen here. Our first core value, we make dependable products. Our products are going to work. We're going to do our utmost best to test them fully before we release them. We're not going to release a product too soon just to get it out there. It's going to be fully tested. We design our products to work with SCADA. Our products are going to have what a SCADA system needs. We're not going to add, we're not going to leave out functionality missing that's going to force people to go through a lot of stuff on their own. And we're not going to put in unnecessary features that get in the way. And then we're going to do our best to make sure our software is easy to use and understand. We don't want you spending hours guessing on how to configure it. We kind of want it to be an intuitive user experience. And then we do our best to have respectable business practices. We really want our customers to enjoy working with us, and we want to enjoy working with our customers.
You know, when I see a list like this, I can tell that this is something you feel passionate about, and you probably had experienced the opposite of all this in business, which I know I have as well, and I think everybody listening has as well. And so it's very understandable why these would be your core values. And I think they're very, very admirable values to have, especially I think we've all suffered through, and vendors go through this at different times, but we've all suffered through products that were released well before they were ready to be on the market, and how much pain, how much money, and how much time, and how much, in my case here, has been lost to the stress of trying to get them to work. So thank you, especially for that one.
Thanks. Yeah, it's nice to hear that feedback too, because at least in the circle of control system engineers I've worked with, we've all kind of shared that common frustration. You've been in those situations where a customer is in a bad situation, and that bad situation is because of a software glitch, and you're jumping through hoops to try to fix it. So yeah, my hope is to have a positive impact there.
Excellent.
Yeah, so that's the background on SCADAmatic, and next up, I guess would be the product.
Yeah, let's take a look. I just for the audience who didn't catch our news coverage, I think it was last week or the week before last. Can you tell us the product name? Tell us what it does. Tell us, what niche are you trying to fill?
But before we get to that, a quick word from our sponsor, theautomationblog.com. Now, did you know I recently redesigned the entire website to make it easier for you to access my over 1,500 pieces of content? And in doing so, I'm also making much of that content available for offline viewing at very affordable prices. For instance, if you take my Control Logics Book of Knowledge, that gets you all of my Control Logics articles all in a single ebook for just $9.99. And the same is true for my brand new Compact Logics e-guide. I also have video collections available for $9.99. Now, these include lifetime access to stream and download all the videos in different collections. Like I have a Control Logics collection, I have a Compact Logics collection, and etc. So if you want to learn more, if you want to support the Automation Podcast and the Automation Blog and our other shows, please visit us over at theautomationblog.com/TAB.
Yes, yeah. So the product is called SimServe, and it is a Modbus Device Simulator. It is our first product of what we plan to have a suite of products. And basically, the idea is SimServe will help simulate devices while you're working on a SCADA system when you don't actually have those devices on hand.
Which I see people asking for this all the time. We've talked about it in our automation Q&As where people are like, the product's not coming in for another couple of weeks, but I got to do all my code. I got to get it all, the communications worked out. So it's a pretty important thing to have. So it's great that you're working on this. So can you dig into it a little bit more and tell us exactly, because I already, like, I'm trying to ask leading questions because I already have dug into this quite deeply in the morning show. But can you dig into some more details for the users on what exactly this first release does?
Yes, of course. So the easiest way to understand SimServe is probably to take a look at some use case examples, and I'm just up on the company website right here. So first use case, which is the simplest situation here. Let's say you've got a SCADA system and it's talking to a Modbus device. And let's say for whatever reason, you can't get that Modbus device going on your development platform. Maybe it's too expensive for the customer to buy a second one for you, and the real one's already installed on site and it's not going anywhere. Maybe the customer hasn't ordered it yet. In those cases, that's where SimServe can help you. You set up a computer, you put a copy of SimServe on it, and it will simulate this Modbus device for the SCADA system as if you had the actual device on hand. Moving on, there are some more complicated scenarios that's kind of unique to what SimServe can do. And let's take a look at a use case where you've got a SCADA system and it's talking to a plethora of Modbus devices. And maybe it's going through some gateways that are converting between Modbus TCP/IP to Modbus RTU or Modbus ASCII. Well, it's pretty unlikely that you're going to be able to simulate this entire, or that you're going to be able to build this entire network on your development platform just due to the cost and time required. And what that results in a lot of the time is system integrators simply don't worry about the communication aspect. They develop the SCADA system best they can, then they go out, they deploy it, and they have to work through those communication kinks on site, which can be pretty tough. If you're a control systems engineer, you've probably felt that before. So to kind of eliminate those headaches and to get ready before you go out to site, what you can do is you can just set up a computer with a copy of SimServe on it, connect that to the SCADA system on your development platform, and with just a little bit of time, you can actually configure SimServe to simulate all these devices and all these gateways for you. And basically, it allows you to eliminate all that communication headache, communication risk that you typically run into on site.
Now, I think you glossed over something that I want to just point out for the audio-only audience. this is not only simulating Modbus RTU, it's also doing Modbus TCP and the very rare but still needed in many cases Modbus ASCII. So you're doing all three, and you're doing it unlimited, until your PC runs out of resources. But they can do many, many, many of these devices, right?
That's correct. Yes, you can configure devices using any one of those three protocols. And actually, I'll just scroll down here and show some of the specifications. So yeah, as you mentioned, we can do RTU, ASCII, TCP/IP, and we support just about all the Modbus function codes that you're ever going to need as well.
Yeah. So the big ones that I've used the most were the read coils, the discrete inputs, holding registers, input registers, write coils. So 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Those have been the big ones for me. But you're supporting 15, 16, 17, 43, 14. So if anybody out there is a Modbus guru, you'll know what those are, and that's just great support. It seems like for any application I've used in the last 30 some odd years, this would have been a good fit. Hey, I want to ask you though, and I know you're going to jump into the software in a second, but just kind of here preliminary, if I'm doing all those different devices, would I be able to copy and paste them, like duplicate them? Because a lot of times it's the same device, instantiated 50 times, right? So is there a way to
Right.
like design one and then duplicate it?
There is right
Okay.
now. So this is version 1 of the release. We do have some enhancements we've got planned to make life a little bit better on everyone as we move forward. Right now, if you want to copy and paste devices, you do that by going into a config file.
Okay.
In terms of the user interface, it's pretty quick, but it is still a manual process.
Yeah, I think most of us has done that before, editing config files or text files or any files. And
Right.
but it'll be nice to have that built into the system. But I think all engineers, they're very comfortable doing that. I mean, I'm still going into my VMXs occasionally to edit them because of things that are not inside of VMware. But and that's the other
Right.
question I
Right.
wanted to ask you. Now, I think a lot of us, the more seasoned developers would probably be running on virtual machines. But if let's say have you seen any problem trying to run this on the same machine or the same virtual image as like maybe Ignition or Factory Talk View or Wonderware or something like that? Any issues? Like, do they have to be separated by a network, or do they have to be on two separate virtual machines, or is having everything on one virtual machine okay?
Absolutely okay. Yeah, you can have
Okay.
everything on the same virtual machine. The only reason why in the diagrams we always show SimServe on a separate machine,
Hmm.
and the reason is kind of the philosophy that you want your development environment to exactly match your production environment. So this allows you to get your network adapters and things like that on your server virtual machine set up the same way it will be on site. However, if that is just inconvenient for you, by all means, install SimServe on the same computer as the SCADA server, and they'll talk just fine.
Yeah, I could definitely sing. There's a lot of people that have a single case scenario. That's the only case they have at their facility, so they run everything on the same box. But
Yep.
most of us would just spin up a separate SimServe VM and just call it a day because we'd be using it with all different type of SCADA packages, not just X or Y. So and I'm assuming you've tested it with VMware and virtual PC, and it works great.
Yes, yeah, it's good with VMware. It's good with what's the other VirtualBox.
VirtualBox, yes.
Yes, and I'm trying to remember. There's a third one out there, but it's been too long. But yes, it's good in the virtual environment. In development here, we actually use a different virtualization system, but it's good on that one as well.
So the other question I want to say is, so I understand simulating Modbus TCP because you have Ethernet built right into the operating system, right? So, I mean, but what are you doing to simulate because Modbus RTU and ASCII, those are kind of serial protocols, right?
Yep.
So I mean, do you end up? I mean, how does that work? do you end up simulating a bunch of COM ports?
But first, a word from our sponsor, theautomationblog.com. Did you know I took the first 5 seasons of the Automation Minute and Show, and I compiled all of those videos? That's over 270 videos and over 29 hours of video. And I compiled it into a video collection, which you can pick up for just $35 on USB. Or if you prefer digital, you can get it for $30 with a lifetime streaming and downloads. And this is a great way to support the Automation Podcast and the Automation Blog and our other shows. So if you're interested, please visit theautomationblog.com/TAB1.
So on virtual machines these days, it's pretty hard to get a physical serial port connected on a physical server and then link that to a virtual machine. It is possible, but it can be a pain. What's most common, we can support it that way if you go that way, but what's most common is that people will, they'll use a virtual COM port simulator of some kind, and that can either go through a TCP IP port or a USB port.
Excellent. So what else did you want to tell us about SimServe?
So I think that's probably a good overview when it comes to SimServe, and I think the next step is for me to give you a demonstration.
Yeah, let's go ahead and do that.
All right. So for the demonstration, basically, I'm going to just simulate a single Modbus device. I'm going to keep things real simple, and we'll connect that up to an ignition SCADA system. And basically, I've got ignition installed on one virtual machine, and I've got SimServe already installed on another virtual machine, and I'll just kind of walk us through the configuration process. So first, I'm going to connect up to SimServe. All right, so this is the SimServe computer, and I've got the interface opened already. So SimServe is just a web interface. Okay, it's installed and it runs as a Windows server, and then you access the interface just by going to localhost, or you can actually access the web interface from other computers on the same network as well. And what we have here is just a completely blank configuration. This is how the software loads out of the box. And I'm going to go ahead and create a new network item right now. We're going to just simulate one device. I'm going to call this device 01. All right. And I'll explain a little bit of what's going on in this forum, but I'm going to try to not, bore anybody too much with details here. So network item type, you've got 2 options, device or gateway. Again, that's because we can simulate the gateways or the protocol converters out there as well as the devices, but we're keeping it simple. So we'll just stick with device. And then protocol here, we can choose between ASCII, RTU, or TCP Modbus. I'm going to choose Modbus TCP for this example. I think that's probably just the easiest. Next up, we can assign an IP address to the device as well as the port that this device will be listening to Modbus requests on. When you take a look at the IP address, by default, it has all zeros in there. And what that basically means is the device is going to respond to any IP address that is assigned to the host. And I'm just going to leave it that way for this example. You can see the IP address of the host up here at the top of the RDP session. So that's what we'll be using on the ignition side. And then port 502, that's the standard Modbus port. Next, register address offset can be either 0 or 1. The Modbus standard actually requires devices to use this 1, but a lot of manufacturers, there's different thought processes. Sometimes devices were developed before the standard was locked in. So in some cases, you'll have to switch that to 0. And then go ahead, Shawn.
No, that's very important. I know there are different, just from my personal experience using Modbus with different Allen Bradley products, some were base 0, some were base 1. So that offset's extremely important.
Yes, yeah. And if you're working with a SCADA system that doesn't want to change and it's one way, and a PLC that doesn't want to change that's the other way, you end up jumping through a lot of hoops, right? Yeah. So by default, we set everything to what the Modbus standard dictates, but we try to give you the flexibility to change it if you need to. And then moving on here, bit, byte, and word order. Again, this is something that the Modbus gurus, the communication gurus, will typically know more about. But some CPUs and some PLCs like to store integers with bits going from left to right. Others like to go right to left. And then when you try to make the two talk to each other over Modbus, you'll see number 1, 2, 3 in one device, but when it gets read into another device, it looks completely different. That's typically because the bit, byte, or word order is off. So we have the capability. You can change the way SimServe will interpret the bit order for the device you're simulating, so you can make it match what the actual device is doing. And for my case, I actually know the computer I've got SimServe installed on is slightly different than the one Ignition is installed on. So I'm actually going to make a couple of adjustments right now. And then I'm just going to press save, and that's going to create the device.
So just for the audio audience, we got the SimServe web page open. On the left side, we have a tree. At the very top of the tree, we have file help. Then we have a big network, and under the network is where we had the add new device. We clicked on that. We got a pop-up. We changed those settings we just talked about, and now the device shows back up in the tree as the new device. Very simple and straightforward, at least to me, I thought it was.
Thanks for that. All right. Next up, what we can do is just open this device up here. And basically what you're seeing is all the memory registers in the device. By default, it starts out with every possible Modbus register. However, you can configure it to narrow that list down if you want it to match a device exactly. And so on this table here, so we're looking at the 0x registers, or the coils, however you know them, but there's a few different nomenclatures out there. And what we can do here, I'm just going to click on a bit here to toggle. What I just did was I just turned the 0x register 1 on. And with that said, what I'm actually going to do now is flip over to my Ignition SCADA virtual machine here. Okay, so what I've just pulled up is an Ignition perspective HMI that I've pre-created just to be efficient with everyone's time here. And on this HMI screen, what you're seeing here is a list of 8 tags and their corresponding values. And these tags are just linked to Modbus registers in that SimServe device we already created. And so tag 1 right here is linked to Modbus address 0x1, and you see tag value of 1. That's because we activated that coil back when we were in SimServe. And so that's a pretty basic example. I'm going to get just a little bit fancier here. I'm actually going to skip down to tag 4, because I think that's probably the most enlightening next example to show. And I'm going to go into SimServe, and we're going to toggle some registers to get a value displayed here on tag 4. Now, before I jump back over to SimServe, let me just point out, this is an unsigned integer 32-bit. And there's different nomenclatures out there. Some people would call that an unsigned long. Some people would call that an unsigned double int. Some people would just call that an int. The thing that's unique about this 32-bit piece here is a Modbus register is only 16 bits long. And what this one is doing, what Ignition's going to do to read a 32-bit integer is it's actually going to combine 2 Modbus registers together mathematically and calculate what that value should be. And it can be kind of a pain when you're working directly with Modbus registers to do the math on your own to figure out what value needs to be in what register to get your desired value displayed here up on the screen. So for that situation, we've got a feature in SimServe that'll help you, and I'm going to show that now. So rather than switching back to the SimServe computer, I'm actually just going to go to the web interface of SimServe by typing in the computer's IP address, and I can just access it straight from my Ignition VM. All right. So I've got device 01 open, and we're reviewing the registers here. I'm going to flip over to the tags tab. Basically, SimServe, it has the ability to tag registers the same way PLCs do, the same way Ignition does, the same way other SCADA systems do. And that just makes things quite a bit easier on the developer. So let's call this tag 4. We're going to name it the same that we've named it in Ignition. And let's switch the data type here. Let's make this the unsigned integer 32 that Ignition is expecting. And let's set the starting address at 3x2, just like Ignition was, and we'll press the check mark to add the tag there. All right, so it's got an initial value of 0 here. I'm going to go ahead and put in a value. Let's do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. All right, let's flip back over to the registers here. And let's go to that 3x2 register that we just entered in. All right, so you'll see here, 3x2, it has a value of 1. 3x3, which is the next register, is the second half of that 32-bit integer, has 57920. Okay, that's because SimServe just calculated the right value for both of these registers. If we jump up to the Ignition HMI, now you see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So basically, the same way that Ignition is reading the registers is the same way that SimServe is writing to them. So that's kind of a feature that helps SimServe stand out a little bit in the Modbus simulation world. And now I'm going to move on to I'm going to skip to tag 8 here. This is a float 64-bit. And basically, same thing as the 32-bit integer. This requires 4 Modbus registers and a lot of conversion between binary to make a floating point value. So let's jump over to SimServe here. Let's go back to the tags. Add tag 8 right here. And let's scroll down the data type. In SimServe nomenclature, we call a 64-bit float a float double. And let's assign that to the same register Ignition is looking at, 4x4, and let's press the check mark. Let's go ahead and give that value. We'll just do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.12. Okay. Let's flip back over to the registers and see what SimServe did. All right. 4x4 down to 4x7. This is what SimServe calculated needed to be in each register. And then if we flip over to the Ignition perspective, HMI, we get that same number we put in, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.1. And it looks like I've got the precision turned down 1 decimal, so we just see the 0.1 instead of the 0.12. But as you can see, it's working.
And that's huge, because if you had to do that manually, like kind of figure out what those numbers were, it could really give you a headache, right? And so a lot of us would turn to Excel and play around in there. But having that built in, being able to create tags and do that, that's such a time saver.
Good. Yes, that's exactly what we were hoping for. We've all played the Excel game, the Windows calculator binary game, and it's just not any fun. So hopefully we can automate that and make life a little bit easier for the developer.
Now I got a question for you, and this may be off topic, but now I'm thinking, well, this is TCP. Could I actually have a PLC read this data in instead of Ignition? Maybe have some PLC that has Modbus TCP built in, access these same values.
Absolutely, you can. Yeah, I use SCADA a lot because I feel like it's a good way to explain things. But really, generically, you got to think about it as SimServe can work with any Modbus client. That Modbus client could be a PLC, it could be a SCADA system, it could be an embedded microcontroller with a Modbus C++ library that the programmer put in. It can work with anything that speaks Modbus.
All right, so now I'm really going out on a limb here, and this may give you a headache. If I installed a serial port in my computer, would SimServe be able to spit out the Modbus RTU out of that serial port, that physical serial port or USB serial port?
Yes, that's exactly what it can do. I can actually show here. Let's do a new network item. If you were to select RTU, basically it's going to give you the option to connect to the serial port that's installed on the host of SimServe. So basically what you do is you pop open Windows Computer Manager, and you look at your list of serial ports. If you've got a serial port installed on the computer, you'll see it say COM port 2. You enter the exact name of COM 2, and it'll talk out that serial port.
That's awesome. I'm one of those crazy guys who's actually installed physical serial ports into my computer and then have them mapped into my VMs because I work with a lot of older stuff.
Yeah.
Just because I've been doing this for over 30 years, but that's awesome. Really good. Not exactly what the product was designed for, but really the product is designed to do this because it does it.
That's exactly right. Thanks. Yes. Yeah, we were trying to make it as flexible as possible. So yeah, if you've got serial ports installed on the computer, it'll work with that. It'll work through your Ethernet port or your USB.
Yeah, just anybody using VMware and you're trying to use those USB serial ports. It seems like in the latest version you have to edit your VMX files. So just FYI, a little tip there for anybody trying that. But back to you.
Awesome. Yeah. And so that really is the demonstration in a nutshell. There are some other things that SimServe can do that I'm not really highlighting here. The most powerful feature that SimServe has, which I'm not going into great depths here, just because it's hard to do quickly, is the simulation of multiple Modbus devices and having them behind gateways. Basically, what would happen is you just continue down the same process. I made one device, you'd make multiple devices.
Mm-hmm.
Let's say, I'll show just as a quick example. Let's say we have a gateway here. I'm just going to call this gateway 01. Let me change this type to gateway here. And let's say what this gateway is doing is converting Modbus TCP. Let's go to Modbus RTU here. You give the gateway an IP address and a port. I just punch in a quick number here. Give it the host IP, and I'm going to change the port to 503 and click save here. And now we've got a gateway right here, and I can start putting devices underneath this gateway. And
very interesting. Okay.
Yeah, basically what's happening is we are just building this network topology right here. And then you can configure your ignition system to connect to each one of these devices through those gateways, through those different network topologies, and you're good to go.
Yeah, just to the audio audience, it's almost like a master device in the tree. You create the gateway in the tree, and then you add all the devices to it instead of just to the tree itself. So it's almost like a subfolder if you want to visualize it that way, if you're walking the dog or driving to work or whatnot. But I love the implementation of that. That makes it very easy.
Awesome, thank you. Yeah, so that's SimServe in a nutshell. We're hoping it can be a useful product for controls engineers out there and save them some time.
Now, as somebody who's getting in on this product right from the beginning, what are we talking about price? So first, let's tell them the website. It is SCADAmatic.com.
You got it. Yep, SCADA spelled like SCADA and Matic.
Like automatic, but SCADAmatic. And then what is the cost of this? And is there does it expire after so long? Let's talk about, let's say people are excited. They want to go grab a copy of it. What do they do to pick up a copy?
So you go to SCADAmatic.com website. The software is free to download and install and configure. And then you can purchase a license. The license is $75. And basically, the software runs without activation, but it doesn't respond to Modbus requests until you've installed the actual license on it.
Okay.
And the website's fairly clear. It'll walk you through that activation process. It only takes a couple of minutes. I swear it's easy. And once you've purchased a license, it's a perpetual license. The software will continue running for forever. And you'll be eligible for minor upgrades without purchase of a new license. So we're on version 1.0 right now. When we go to 1.1, 1.2, and so forth, you'll receive those upgrades for free. When we jump up to 2.0, a new license will need to be purchased.
So those licenses are per PC. So if you have 2 development computers in your office, you're going to be buying one for each of them if you need to run the software on each. This is not some type of dongle that you're going to be pulling out. This is a software license per PC basis, right?
You got it. Yeah, basically, one license per PC. And when you go through the activation process, it's going to keep track of the hardware details of the PC you're running on, so that that license, you'll find out you won't be able to transfer that over to another computer.
That's fine. And if you're going to do VM, just get the hardware right on your VM. Just make sure everything's right. And of course, take a snapshot before and after, and always back up your VMs, because if you lose your hard drive, you don't want to lose all your licenses, right? But yeah, that's the important thing. I've ran into that a few times where I didn't have enough memory set, and it triggers a license reset, even sometimes in Windows, and it's so painful. So in any case, that's always just common good practices with VMs. And that way, when you do turn in your laptop and get your new one, you just bring your VM with you, and life is good.
Yeah, I agree completely with that advice. And we have tried to make things pretty flexible. So if you read the license agreement, we say one copy of SimServe per PC. However, we know that stuff happens. We'll actually allow you to activate the software more than once, because we're trusting the customer, that they're, using the software per the license agreement. So yeah, if you're set up on a VM and you end up making a change and the software says, "Hey, I'm not activated anymore," you can repeat the activation process up to a certain number of times, and we won't charge you money for anything like that. And of course, you could always reach out to our support as well, and we'll help you through any of those issues.
That's good, because it's good to know that. I know a lot of companies do. Like I use the Adobe Suite, and I can set it up on my laptop. I can set it up on my desktop, and then if something goes wrong, there's an easy way to recover it. So it's good to have that flexibility so that you get one license for one PC, but if something goes wrong, you can there's a easy workaround without having to spend several hours on the phone with tech support. But
Right.
well, I'm excited to find some time to play with it. I don't know when that's going to be, but I think what I'll end up doing is just working it into I'm refilming all my PLC courses this summer. So I think I'm going to be working it into those courses, just so I have a chance to play with it. But James, I really want to thank you for coming on the show. This is a great product at a great price. I want to encourage everybody out there, if you believe in supporting small businesses and awesome new products like this, give it a shot. It's not going to break your bank. It's not like buying a $10,000 license of whoever's SCADA package, right? So and let James know what you think about his product. And James, again, thank you for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it, Shawn.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that episode. I want to thank James for coming on the show and telling us all about SimServe. With that said, if you did enjoy this episode, please consider giving us a like and a sub. And if you want to follow me or get in touch, you can do so over at automation.locals.com. I also want to thank our sponsor for this episode, the automationschool.com, where I teach PLC, HMI, and SCADA courses. Feel free to reach out to me if you're interested. You can use the contact link, or you can just call and leave me a voicemail using the phone number on the top of the website. With that, I want to wish you all a very happy, safe, and healthy week. And until next time, my friends, peace.